Thank you all for being here. Our speaker, Dr. David Field, who is my colleague, the other ecumenical staff officer for the Council of Bishops of the United Methodist Church, let me know he's having a little bit of difficulty getting on. So we may twist around the schedule a little bit and ask him to come back next month. And so this month, I thought we might just take a little bit of time to spend with each other to ask questions. And I can give you some updates if you'd like to have them, and just kind of check with each other. So think about your questions, and I will give you an update from the Pan-Methodist Commission, which just met this past Friday and Saturday. The Pan-Methodist Commission is, of course, the result of dialogue among 6 Methodist denominations or communions, including the CME, the AME, the AMEZ, the UMAP, the United Methodist Church, and the AUMP. And they were in dialogue for several years with, of course, racism being one of the core elements of that dialogue, and came to full communion a few years ago. And so we have an annual commission meeting where each of the communions sends 6 representatives. Since we're all Methodist, it's 3 bishops, 3 other clergy, and 3 laity. And we talk about the things that we've done in the past year, and we plan for things in the future. And so that was just this past Friday and Saturday. And it's a really wonderful group of people. It's one of my favorite things. So what I want to just kind of go through, David just texted me again to tell me he just is not being able to get on. So we do together joint candidacy accreditation, which you may or may not have known, but the United Methodist Church volunteered to host a website for chaplaincy candidates. And now all the candidates from all the Pan-Methodist churches go through this one website portal to enter in their information, and then it gets shot out to whichever denomination in which the person would like to be a candidate for chaplaincy. But it collects it all together. It makes it uniform. And we've been doing that for a few years now. And I just think that's a fabulous thing that we're doing together, a practical thing. There's also the Children in Poverty campaign, which you may have heard about at some point. I know in the Kentucky annual conference, Jack, there's always those containers in the back of the conference area, and districts are challenged to put in money for the Children in Poverty campaign. That's an initiative of the Pan-Methodist Commission, and they have continued to try to care for children during the pandemic. And obviously rates of abuse and hunger have increased. So that's one of the things that we do. Bishop Trimble from Indiana is our connection for that. We also have a young adult task force, and they will do the opening worship for commission meetings. And then they also usually have a young adult consultation where any young adult from any of the communions can get together after the commission meeting is over. And we do a lot of things. One of the things we're being called to do this year is talk about our best practices in our own communion about racial equality and anti-racism work. And we're going to report back on those next year. So in 2023, it will be the year that after the commission meeting, the Pan-Methodist Bishops consultation happens. That happens every other year. So it didn't happen this year, but the bishops will all be invited to come together next year. And they seem to love each other and enjoy that time very much. So questions about the Pan-Methodist Commission? Bishop Jonathan Holston, our United Methodist bishop, has been the chair, and he will be rotating off next year as well, with another bishop coming in. Tora mentioned in the beginning, faith working through love. And that is something that Dr. David Field, who is connecting now, has been trying to pull together for us through the Faith and Order Committee. And that was originally started as sort of, we don't use this word, so don't repeat this word, but sort of as a catechism for United Methodists to talk about the basics of our theology. And hey, David, welcome. We kind of went in a different direction. Do you want to share just a minute about faith working through love?
Okay, sure. Sorry, my computer is, everything's going wrong today. It's one of those days.
We're glad you're here.
Yeah, for some reason I couldn't get on. I just find a strange way of getting onto Zoom, but okay, it's worked now. Faith working through love. This is a relatively short book explaining key aspects of the Christian faith from a UMC perspective, looking mostly at traditional sources, the Wesley brothers, both their hymns and their writings, as well as other documents from the UMC. And the idea is to highlight, it's not designed to be somebody's personal interpretation of Methodist theology. It's really designed as a consensus document, as a document which holds together what is the core which we as the United Methodist Church agree upon. So it was put together by a team. It was fairly rigorously edited. I know some of the people who contributed complained because their particular pet theme was edited out. And so because it was their particular pet theme and wasn't the core of which we agree on. It's written very easy to read with a question and answer format, and then quotations from relevant sources. The idea, it can be used for personal study. It can be used for small group Bible study, kind of home fellowship group type things. On the one hand, for people who are new to the UMC, so this is who we are. And for those who've been with us a long time, just to refresh and say, oh, this is what we are. But also not just kind of theoretical theology, but really saying, how do we live this? I mean, the title, Faith Working Through Love, emphasizes it's not just about our mind and our ideas, but how we live out our faith in life. And how does these core theological themes provide the spiritual nourishment and resources for faithful living in our complex world with all its problems and issues.
Thank you. So that's another great thing to know about. David believes it's going to be published around the beginning of April, so watch for that. Another thing that we're doing on your behalf is we're trying to work to provide all of the bishops with the online version of the NRSV UE Bible. If you don't know about that yet, it's the new Revised Standard Version updated edition with some of the language edited and updated. And that is it's an ecumenical translation that already was a translation and now it's just been updated. That's through Friendship Press, which is a part of the National Council of Churches of Christ in the USA. So a very ecumenical endeavor. It is available now online for $9.99 through Friendship Press. It'll be available in hard copy, I think, August or September. So that's another thing we're working on. Since the United Methodist General Conference has been postponed, that does mean that the United Methodist Church will be able to have a full presence at the World Council of Churches Assembly, which is coming up the end of August, beginning of September in Karlsruhe, Germany. The World Methodist Council will be meeting not this year then, it's being moved to 2024. So those are some of the things going on. Any questions pop into anyone's mind yet? And make sure you watch the chat. People are putting in very important things like what Kyle said.
Would you repeat who's meeting this year?
Yes, of course. This year is the World Council of Churches.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The United Methodist Church sends 8 delegates. And then there are also, the United Methodist Church is also sending 3 young adults to the Getty program, Global Ecumenical Theological Institute, which will run parallel to the World Council Assembly. But then there'll also be a host of people that go as observers and other kinds of participants that just won't have the vote, but will get to experience it.
And where will it be held?
In Germany.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. What other things are you interested in knowing about? The bilateral dialogues people are always curious about. And David is in the process of scheduling the Roman Catholic United Methodist Dialogue. And do you want to say a few words on that?
Yes, so this is an interesting dialogue. It's interesting because most of our dialogues are directed towards full communion agreements, or we have a full communion agreement with the church and we're moving beyond that into how we relate to each other. Theoretically, the Roman Catholic dialogue is also heading towards full communion agreement, but as that is given the significant theological and ecclesiological issues, that is not liable in the probably in my time as ecumenical staff officer here. Whether that happens afterwards, I think will be. So rather than focusing on the kind of process moving towards full communion, we focus on issues which we have in common and where we can mutually enrich each other and work together. So the theme for this next 3 years of dialogue is migration and baptismal identity. And it's interesting, both Catholic and UMC are international churches. Not only are we an international church, but we also have families or links, kind of say family links to other Methodist churches in South America and Latin America and around the world. And so migration becomes an interesting, complex issue, or instead of complex, it becomes a, how does our baptismal identity as Christians and as Methodists relate us to each other across national, geographical, state boundaries in ways that must reshape and shape the way we approach people who come to us from other countries. Now, what happens when, let me take my own example in Switzerland, where we have migrants arriving from Congo who are United Methodists, who are in the country illegally, without correct papers. We share a baptismal identity. We share a common church membership. They can become members of the local United Methodist Church. We don't have a problem with that. But yet, from a legal point of view, we are supposed to be not really associating with each other. We're supposed to be reporting them to the authorities. If you do certain things, you can be prosecuted for harboring illegal immigrants. So how do we relate to that? How does our baptismal identity relate to our national identity and legal requirements in the context of migration? So that's just one kind of set of issues. Perhaps in a different way now, we have the situation here in Europe dealing with Ukrainian refugees, where we have many of them who are United Methodists, and our Methodist churches, particularly along the borders of Ukraine and Eastern Europe, are vitally involved as best they can, although they are small churches with very limited resources, seeking to be hosts to people coming across the border. Not all of those are Methodists, but there are Methodists amongst them. And we're linking up with Methodist churches in Ukraine, seeking to work and support each other. So how does the sense of being one in the body of Christ relate to ethnic, national, political divisions, particularly in an age where people are moving back and forth across the world? So that's the theme of what we're talking about. We're having our first meeting in May and another one in December, and to explore how that will work out. So that's been it's an exciting challenge, because it's not just about kind of theological issues. It's really about practical. What does it mean to be Christians in our contemporary context with the situations we face?
Thank you. So the bilateral dialogues are always ongoing, and David is doing a great job with those. So David and I are also going to be helping to herd together the Methodist Church in Britain, United Methodist Church Concordat group over the next 3 days. That's Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. And that's the Concordat relationship we have with the Methodist Church of Britain is a significantly strong relationship that allows our churches to actually send delegates with vote and voice to each other's conferences, but it also calls us to be in ministry together. And so over the past few years, we have been working on climate change together, and well, not climate change, but climate justice together. We've been working on a migration document that we can give to our Council of Bishops that will help them navigate the kinds of things that David was just talking about. And we're also trying to talk about how we can talk together about our shared theology. So that'll be happening the next 3 days. And then just a quick update on the UMEITs, United Methodist Ecumenical and Interreligious Training. And I want to shout out to Rose, who is here, who is one of our scholarship recipients for UMEIT USA, that will be in parallel to the National Workshop on Christian Unity that Tora mentioned earlier. So UMEIT Zoom is what we're doing now. It's a monthly brief gathering that we just talk about what's going on. And next month, David will talk about what he was going to talk about this month.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. UMEIT Global is a once-a-year gathering somewhere in the connection for us to do a more lengthy in-depth training. This year it will be in Puerto Rico, and because they are one of our Concordat partner churches, and we're going to go there and help them talk about unity post-hurricane. And then I just mentioned UMEIT USA. That's this year in Anaheim in the first week of May. UMEIT Plunge will be taking place this year, and Tora will be one of our participants in that. It's a pilgrimage-based training. The first year, the participants take a pilgrimage to Geneva and Taizé in France to really see in depth what the ecumenical movement on a global level is all about by studying the World Council of Churches and Bossé and Chambassy, which is the Orthodox Center. And then the second year, they take their own interreligious pilgrimage and they design it themselves. UMEIT Young Adult Network just started meeting in the third cohort, and it does have young adults from all over the world who will be meeting together in online training for the next 2 years, and then meeting in person once a year. Finally, there's UMEIT Online, which is a self-directed online training that anybody can take anytime, and it's located in the, you kind of have to find it, and I can help you do that, but on the bishop's website, which is www.unitedmethodistbishops.org. So David, do you have any other updates you want to share, or does anyone have any questions?
Perhaps I can talk about a little bit about another aspect of the work in terms of the dialogues and my other hat, or the faith and order hat. As we all know, coming out of COVID, one of the big questions has been, or one of the issues has been, what about online worship? What took place during the COVID times? You might know that a few years ago, there was a discussion within the UMC about should we offer communion online? And the bishops, Council of Bishops, there was a study group of which I was a part, and the Council of Bishops then issued a statement discouraging, saying this doesn't fit with our understanding of communion. Then came COVID, and Council of Bishops' recommendations were either ignored, or some of the bishops just said, well, do what you like in an emergency situation. Now we come back and have to reflect on what we've done and think about this, and how do we go into the future? And that's not only a challenge for us, it's also an ecumenical challenge, because we have full communion agreements with the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. We're in process of finalizing a full communion agreement with the Episcopalian Church, both of whom have a very, let me say, a high Eucharistic theology. And for many of them, the idea of offering communion online is just doesn't fit their theological formulations of what communion is about consecration of elements, about what elements are used, where people are just taking crackers and Coke out of their fridge and using that. how do we go about that? So this is a new challenge for us in this post-COVID area. How do we reflect theologically? It's a bit, the proverbial trying to closing the stable door if the horse is bolted. Can you pull back from what's happening? If you're not going to pull back, how do you regulate it? How can we find do we just provide a theological justification for what's already happened? Which sometimes tends to happen, where we do something and then find a nice theological reason for having done it. So that's on our agenda for the next coming up to leading up to the November Council of Bishops meeting. We're supposed to provide a recommendation to the Council of Bishops as to how they go ahead. And this is an interesting exercise because from the first time, as far as I know, the Faith and Order Committee has often been a very that's the internal. It's the theological ministry of internal affairs, whereas the ecumenical office is the theological ministry of foreign affairs. And but now we're saying, hang on a minute, our ecumenical partners are important, and what they think is important. And if we're going to be part of the one Church of Christ, then we need to take into account what our ecumenical partners think about these issues. What can we learn from them? What can we listen to the warnings or the cautions that they offer us? So as part of that process, we will be asking our ecumenical partners for input into the process. And so it's going to move from being a purely UMC initiative to really seeking to listen theologically to the voices of our ecumenical partners. And I think that's a new development, and I think something I would want to encourage in other areas as well. But that we hope that listening to our ecumenical partners becomes part of our theological reflection as the UMC, and not just something we do on the side as our ecumenical dialogues. It doesn't really affect our own life. So we're hoping that will enrich this process of discussion.
I hope this has been helpful. Before we end with prayer, just one more shout out about the resources that are available to you on the bishop's website, which Tora put in at least the United Methodist Bishops.org part, she put in the chat. There are brochures available if you are doing interfaith weddings or funerals and want a little help to know about those. That we have an ecumenical handbook that also could be used for Bible study or for study in a church. It has scripture passages. It points you to the discipline and our book of resolutions. It teaches you about ecumenism in the United Methodist Church. That's available. We have an ecumenical calendar that our associate Summer keeps updated for us. And we have an ecumenical annual update book, which will list all of the heads of communion and ecumenical officers, if that's of ever any help to you. And David and I are available as resources as well. So thank you.